Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail, and at 35 years old, I've been through quite a bit recently. I felt it was important to share my story, not just to open up about my experiences, but to also offer a word of caution. Always trust your instincts. Remember, not every family member has your best interests at heart, and it's crucial to protect yourself. My tale begins with how I met my husband, Kevin. We were colleagues, working in different departments, and our paths crossed during a company-wide celebration. Kevin and I hit it off immediately, spending the whole event deep in conversation. By the evening's end, we had exchanged numbers, and it wasn't long before we started dating. After 4 wonderful years together, we decided to get married, marking one of the happiest days of my life. Our bond was strong. We seldom argued and seemed to understand each other perfectly without needing words. However, there was one aspect of my life that presented challenges: my relationship with my mother-in-law, Denise. Denise was, for lack of a better term, quite a character. While generally pleasant, she had her moments of rudeness, including direct insults. Thankfully, Kevin always supported me, which I appreciated immensely. But my issue with Denise wasn't her attitude. It was her memory, or rather, the selective nature of it. Despite our concerns and suggestions that she seek help, Denise insisted there was nothing wrong with her. Yet, it seemed she conveniently forgot things, especially when it involved me. One striking example was when she borrowed my laptop to shop at Best Buy. She ended up making expensive purchases with my saved card information, claiming later to have forgotten it was there. Though the situation was resolved with Kevin's help and Denise repaid me, it was clear that these forgetful incidents often had a selective nature, especially when they impacted me directly. Kevin and I had plans for a quick getaway, but we found ourselves in a bit of a bind when it came to finding someone to care for our cat. All our friends were busy and my parents weren't available either. Reluctantly, I turned to Denise, asking if she could simply drop by our place once a day to refill our cat's food and water bowls. She agreed, assuring us it wouldn't be a problem. However, upon returning, we were greeted by a nightmare. Our home was swarming with ants, and our cat's food bowl was not just full, but overflowing and besieged by ants. Our poor cat was visibly uncomfortable, scratching incessantly. Angry and frustrated, Kevin and I confronted Denise at her home. I couldn't hide my frustration, questioning her on the one task we'd asked of her. She defensively claimed to have filled the bowls with food and water, not acknowledging the chaos that ensued. Her justification that the house's ant infestation wasn't her fault, and her dismissive attitude towards the discomfort she caused our cat, only fueled my anger. She admitted to only visiting once, overfilling the bowls with the logic that it would suffice for the duration of our trip. A flawed approach she seemed to recognize, yet dismiss. Her excuse? She simply forgot about the cat. When pressed on her readiness to take on the responsibility she knew she couldn't handle, her response was indifferent, suggesting the cat's survival was all that mattered. Her attempt at an apology felt hollow, lacking any real sense of remorse for the distress caused. Walking away from that confrontation, I was seething. Denise's nonchalant demeanor in the face of her negligence was infuriating. Kevin attempted to apologize for his mother's actions, but I couldn't let him shoulder the blame for what had transpired. The incident left a sour note, highlighting a careless disregard for the well-being of our beloved pet and a lack of accountability for the chaos it caused. Kevin had no involvement in his mother's negligent actions, so it felt unjust to hold him accountable. After addressing the ant issue and ensuring our cat was healthy again following a visit to the vet, everything seemed to return to normal. This experience, though, was a stark reminder of Denise's lack of consideration and foresight. It was a lesson I wish I had taken more seriously, especially when reflecting on the events that followed. About a year later, I found myself facing another challenging chapter: my pregnancy with my son, Frank. The journey was far from easy, marked by severe pregnancy symptoms and an unexpectedly early labor. Frank's premature birth meant waiting 3 long weeks before I could hold him for the first time. That moment was transformative, solidifying a vow within both Kevin and me to shield him from harm at all costs. In those early, delicate months, Kevin and I chose to limit visitors, including family and friends, to ensure Frank's safety and to foster our family bond. I also took a significant break from work, fortunate to have a year's maternity leave and the option to work from home, allowing me to focus on Frank's care. Fast forward 4 years, and Frank was thriving, a joy to us and those in our lives. However, Kevin and I realized our relationship had been sidelined in the whirlwind of work and parenting. We decided it was time for a date night, a chance to reconnect. When Kevin mentioned our plans to Denise, she immediately offered to babysit Frank. Despite my reservations, stemming from past experiences, I couldn't rationalize them against the innocent expectation that surely she wouldn't harm a child. After some deliberation, Kevin and I reluctantly agreed to let Denise babysit, a decision I couldn't help but feel uneasy about. Kevin and I genuinely enjoyed our date, feeling reconnected after spending much-needed time together. However, upon returning to Denise's place where she was supposed to be watching Frank, the absence of her car instantly raised red flags. Confused yet trying to stay composed, we approached the house, finding it oddly silent. No response came from ringing the bell, amplifying my anxiety. Thankfully, Kevin had a spare key, allowing us to enter. The sight that met us was heartbreaking. Frank was alone, in bed, crying. The relief of holding him did little to quell the fury that surged within me, especially when Kevin confirmed Denise was nowhere to be found. Denise returned shortly after, nonchalantly explaining she'd left to meet a friend for coffee, leaving Frank unattended. Her justification was flippant, prioritizing her social life over the safety of our child and underestimating the gravity of her negligence. Her casual dismissal of the situation and her justification for not wanting to deal with a crying baby or expose her friend to a messy house was appalling. Despite her assurance that she had timed her outing to Frank's sleep, her recklessness was undeniable. Denise's lack of remorse and her assertion that kids are tougher than you think only fueled our decision to prevent her from being near Frank moving forward. Kevin backed me up, confirming our stance to keep Denise away from our son. Despite her protests and attempts to downplay the severity of her actions, we stood firm, driven by the irresponsibility she exhibited. For the next 3 years, Denise's presence was a non-factor in our lives. Even the mere thought of her actions filled me with anger. Though she reached out several times, the safety and well-being of our family remained our priority, leaving no room for her carelessness. Despite Denise's attempts to reconnect, I kept my distance, supported by Kevin, though it was clear he struggled with the estrangement from his mother. I encouraged him to maintain his relationship with her, stipulating that Denise remain removed from Frank's and my life. Kevin continued to communicate with her, albeit limitedly, keeping her at arm's length from our family life. Eventually, Kevin broached a sensitive subject: Denise's desire to reconcile and re-enter our lives, particularly to reconnect with Frank after years of persistent apologies. Her sudden fervor for apology raised both skepticism and a hard stance from me, rejecting the idea of her reintegration into our lives. Kevin relayed Denise's pleas, her fear of dying estranged from her family, her regret over past actions, and her yearning to see her grandson. Despite Kevin acknowledging her apparent remorse and suggesting a gradual reintroduction to Frank's life, my reservations held firm. The prospect of reintroducing someone who had previously endangered our son felt unthinkable, regardless of her remorse. Kevin proposed a cautious approach, ensuring Frank would never be left unsupervised with Denise, aiming to balance the familial bonds against the need for safety and accountability. Reluctantly, I conceded to a tightly controlled meeting, under the strict condition that any interaction between Denise and Frank would happen only in my presence, and with Frank's consent. This compromise, born of a blend of skepticism, the need to protect my son, and the recognition of familial ties, marked a cautious step toward possibly mending a fractured family dynamic, albeit under watchful eyes and strict boundaries. Kevin and I agreed that Denise could attempt to rebuild her relationship with Frank, but only under strict conditions that respected both our and Frank's boundaries. Any sign of discontent from Denise regarding these rules would immediately end her visitation privileges. Despite my reservations, I allowed her the chance to prove herself. Surprisingly, Denise embraced her role as a grandparent, respecting the limits we set and gradually forming a positive relationship with Frank. Our family began to include her in weekly dinners, where she lavished Frank with gifts and planned outings aimed at bringing joy to his life. Over 4 years, her consistent efforts led me to cautiously believe in her change. However, an unexpected request from Denise reopened old wounds. She expressed a desire to take Frank to the wildlife park alone, citing his fascination with giraffes as a perfect opportunity for them to spend quality time together. This suggestion immediately raised alarms due to her past negligence. Despite her apology and insistence on having changed, the thought of giving her unsupervised time with Frank, especially for an activity hours away, was unnerving. Her plea for a chance to prove her transformation met with a firm stance from us. The request for alone time, given the history and distance involved, was a boundary we weren't ready to cross. Denise's frustration at our refusal hinted at the delicate balance of trust and caution we navigated, highlighting the ongoing impact of past actions on present decisions. Our resolution remained clear. While we were open to her involvement in Frank's life, it would always come with safeguards to ensure his well-being. Despite my apprehensions about Denise taking Frank on a solo trip to the wildlife park, Kevin's confidence in his mother's transformation and Frank's enthusiastic response swayed our decision. Denise had proven herself over the years, earning a special place in Frank's heart as his beloved grandma. So, with a heavy heart, I agreed to let them go, setting a return time of 5 p.m. The day of their outing, my anxiety was palpable, overshadowing the joy in Frank's anticipation. As the clock struck 5 p.m. and there was no sign of their return, my worry intensified. Each passing hour without their arrival amplified my fears, leading to a flurry of rationalizations about their delay. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, I reached out to Denise, only to be met with a response that chilled me to the core. Denise casually mentioned she had left Frank at the wildlife park, having lost track of him in the heat and forgetting to inform us of the situation. Her nonchalant admission, treating such a grave oversight with a disconcerting lack of urgency, was beyond alarming. The realization that Denise had not only misplaced Frank, but had also left the wildlife park without him sparked a panic unlike any other, highlighting gross negligence that contradicted all the progress and trust we had cautiously built up over the years. This incident served as a harrowing reminder of the complex dynamics of trust, responsibility, and the ongoing effort to balance familial relationships with the paramount importance of a child's safety. Upon hearing Denise's unfathomable response about forgetting Frank at the wildlife park, my fear and anger reached a boiling point. Her lackadaisical attitude towards such a serious oversight was incomprehensible. Asserting that he's just a child, as if that minimized the gravity of her negligence, only added fuel to the fire. The suggestion that Frank, still so young, could navigate his way out of being lost on his own was irresponsible at best. I ended the call abruptly, driven by an urgent need to ensure Frank's safety. Rushing to the wildlife park with Kevin, who expressed regret for persuading me to trust Denise for this outing, we both acknowledged our shared mistake in judgment. It's one thing to trust family, but another to ignore glaring signs of irresponsibility. En route, contacting the wildlife park's management brought a sliver of relief when they confirmed Frank was safe with security, awaiting our arrival. Arriving at the wildlife park after hours, the sight of Frank breaking down upon seeing us was heart-wrenching. He clung to us, his silence and tears painting a vivid picture of his ordeal. The security team's recount of Frank's distress was a testament to the emotional trauma he had endured. My heart ached as I tried to comfort him on the drive back, feeling a profound sense of guilt for the situation we had put him in. Resolved to take action against Denise's reckless behavior, Kevin and I agreed it was necessary to involve the police. Reporting her actions was not just about seeking justice for Frank's ordeal, but about ensuring such negligence would not be overlooked. The authorities' willingness to investigate further indicated the seriousness of Denise's actions, necessitating Kevin's cooperation for the process ahead. This decision marked a turning point, emphasizing our commitment to Frank's well-being above all else, and the imperative need to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. An hour after initiating the process with the police, Denise's call caught me off guard. Her indignation at the police presence at her doorstep and her attempt to downplay her actions were met with my unwavering resolve. Her admission of using Frank as a tool for revenge revealed a disturbing lack of empathy and understanding. Despite her attempts to justify her actions and criticize our parenting, I stood firm on the necessity of legal consequences for her endangerment of Frank's safety. Her defiance in the face of potential legal repercussions only solidified our decision to press charges. It was clear that her actions were not only irresponsible, but malicious, with little regard for the real dangers her negligence posed. At the police station, Kevin and I shared detailed accounts of Denise's pattern of carelessness, while the officers prepared to hear from Frank. Despite his initial fear of the officers, a gentle approach and a kind gesture with a donut helped to ease his nerves. We spent time reassuring him, emphasizing his safety, and the importance of sharing his experience when he felt ready. Gradually, with our encouragement and the supportive environment created by the officers, Frank began to share his perspective on the ordeal. It was a crucial step in ensuring that his voice was heard in the process, underscoring the seriousness of Denise's actions and the impact they had on him. This moment was not just about seeking justice, but also about reinforcing to Frank that he was safe and supported, and that his feelings and experiences were valid and important. In his conversation with the police, Frank bravely shared how Denise had left him alone in front of the lion enclosure at the wildlife park, claiming she had a surprise for him. She instructed him to cover his eyes and count to 12, but when he looked again, Denise was nowhere to be found, leaving him abandoned. Thankfully, Frank's quick thinking led him to security, where he stayed safe until Kevin and I could retrieve him. My outrage at Denise's actions fueled a firm request to the police to treat her case with the gravity it deserved. They assured us she instructed him to cover his eyes and count to 10, of their commitment to justice. Over the following months, Kevin and I attended numerous court hearings, leading to Denise being convicted of child desertion and endangerment. Her 8-year sentence brought a mix of emotions, primarily relief that Frank would no longer be exposed to such recklessness. Though Denise appeared devastated by the verdict, for us, it marked the beginning of a healing process. Free from the constant fear for Frank's well-being, to aid in Frank's recovery from the trauma, we sought therapy, which has significantly helped him. The journey towards normalcy is gradual, especially for Kevin, who grapples with the reality of his mother's actions endangering his son. Together, as a family, we are making strides towards healing, embracing a new normal with cautious optimism. Thank you for being a part of our story's audience and understanding the complexities and the resilience it has brought to our lives.